Hello and welcome back to part 7 and the last part of the iRobot review. Picking up where I left off. The computer was the thing that was in control, to the degree that it was in control of everyone that was in control at the company, meaning it was usurping even the authority of the individuals that were in control. I need you to really think about that. We, as individuals, we use our phones, we use our televisions, we have all of these kinds of things. Technology has taken over in full control of our lives, and it happened so subtly. Does anybody remember the time frames when our phones were not computers? Hold on, I got something for you. Remember these things? The types of phones that actually were phones that had dials, dial-ups, keypads, notations, all that. Anybody remember that? Anybody remember that? Anybody remember when kids used to actually go outside to play because they wanted to go outside because there wasn't such a thing? Our parents actually didn't even have TVs. They had radios. But time evolved. We ended up with cell phones. We ended up with car phones. We ended up with phones that became Blackberries, and then we ended up with these kinds of phones and the computers that we started out with when Microsoft first came out with the first computers, and Apple with their first computers, and it has been revealed that there were certain computer systems that were in, let's say, thought process almost 10 to 20 years before certain systems were released, because they already had the idea for it, they just hadn't released it yet. Some of these things we saw in movies ahead of time. It's not that they didn't have it, it's just that they had to what? Coax our minds into coming into agreement with these things, right? You would see these futuristic films and there would be hoverboards and all of this kind of stuff. Back to Future. Now there's such a thing as a hoverboard. Cell phones and all of this type. Cars that run on their own. Even technological cars, these Tesla things, these were all things that they knew about ahead of time. But the powers that be, and I'm just going to say it, the powers that be had this stuff on ice. But then they would choose who they wanted to be the representative. You think these folks just thought it was a good idea to come up with these thought processes and ideas? Hey, I'm going to come up with a Tesla. Or, hey, I'm going to... Or maybe they were chosen to be the face of it. Maybe somebody got tapped on their shoulder and said, we want you to be the face of this. Just like models become the face of certain brands, musicians become the face of certain companies. But who's in control of that? You see what I mean? These ideas and these things were already previously determined that they were going to happen anyway, but due to the fact of the mountains in which these individuals sat on made the determination of who was going to be the one that they were going to use in order to set the trend for the education, for the family, for the what technology would be the thing that was going to be the director that would take it. What entertainment would direct. Because see, Satan always knew Satan was in control of what? The airwaves. So if he's controlling the airwaves, technology is part of the airwaves. Radio waves are part of the airwaves. Social media, our computer systems. So over time, they knew to introduce certain things that we think that we're in control. But are we? Half of us can't even put our phones down to go to sleep at night because the light from our actual devices disrupts our sleep patterns. There are scientific studies that show that if you turn your phone off about an hour before you go to bed, you'll sleep better. Most of us stay on our phone until we go to bed and then have trouble sleeping. When did times change? I saw a report on this Sunday morning where it was a parent and her daughter, and they were talking about the fact of our devices and how our devices constantly keep our attention all day. But these devices have always made our lives more convenient, right? If you own a business, then having a phone, you got your planner, you got your documents, you got everything that you need. You can contact, you can even use the phone as an actual phone and call the people that you need to call. You can open up spreadsheets, so on and so forth, but also you can integrate, because there have been many a time. I remember one time I broke the monitor on a mini laptop I had, and I had a USB cable that connected to the back of my TV, and I used the TV as a monitor, and I continued to operate the same way. I did everything that I would normally do on the laptop on my television. We have integrated everything into technology. Technology controls us. But we see how detrimental it can be when we have days like when AT&T had a shutdown and everybody went and lost their whole daggone mind on that day. There are Facebook memes. There are memes still out. If you Google it, the day Facebook shut down, the day AT&T shut T-Mobile down. People were freaking out because they couldn't use their phones. But nobody's catching on to the fact that, wait, AT&T, they phones shut down. Then Facebook, they shut down. Then it was previously some other entire system shut down. Then all of a sudden, now you're seeing that there are alarm systems going off in your city. There are technical warnings coming across your TV on every station once every week almost, for tornado warnings, storm warnings, all of these kinds of things. And they're testing the system. The sirens are being tested. Why? Anybody asking these questions? But we sit here and we continue to operate with our phones, and we stay integrated. This is how we know we're integrated into our phone system, because we don't even pay attention to the world going on around us. Because if we're business people, you're on your phone from the time you get up, whether you're checking your phone to check to see what it is that you need to check on for the rest of your day, checking your schedule, checking your this, checking your that. Then you got to go out, then you got to come back, and then you got to deal with that, and then you got to have children don't even engage with their parents. Everybody got their cell phone out. People go to church. I remember one time I went to church and every single one of the kids had a cell phone in front of their faces in order to keep them preoccupied during the service so that they wouldn't act up. All these devices. And what had happened? I remember I was watching a program on YouTube several years back, and they talked about what would happen if there was a full-on blackout of all these technological systems. People would be absolutely confused. Why? Because subconsciously, all of this technology controls us. We don't have control of this technology. It controls us. And the systems that they have in place through propaganda tell us what we're supposed to use, when we're supposed to use it, what's the new thing, what's the new cell phone, what's the new laptop. And because of the way that they produce it and how they keep putting it in front of your face in your advertisements on your phone, in your advertisements on your television, you're like, oh, I must buy the new thing. And then because they have such a thing as it's called something opulence. I keep forgetting what that first word is. But it literally means that it's designed at a specific point in time to, through each of the app updates, to slowly wear down so that you will have to be forced to buy a new cell phone, that you'll have to be forced to buy a new laptop. I'll never forget the time that I had kept one of my laptops for about 10 years because I was moving around a lot, so I wasn't always using that laptop, but I would buy like a cheaper laptop and use that in between the times. But this particular laptop, it lasted me for some time. I put a new application on it, updated it, and I remember I contacted Microsoft. I had the computer for about 10 years, and they kept trying to do the diagnostic. For some reason, they couldn't internally get it to do what they wanted it to do. And they said, how old is this computer? I said, 10 years old. And they sat up there and said, I lie to you not. They screamed at me, go buy another computer. Why? Because systems are created to break down, and they want you to buy something new. It does not afford them for your things to continue to operate. You understand what I'm saying? So you are in control 24/7. I don't care how it seems, but just check it. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me. I had a situation where one of my devices was no longer usable over a year ago. And because of that, it provided me the situation where I could no longer get on the internet, do whatever it was that I was trying to get done. It inconvenienced me to a severe degree because I had to keep going around and doing this, that, and the other in order to get around to get the things that I needed to get done. It had me out doing all of this kind of stuff in order to make sure that I was able to get what I needed to get done. Why? Because some of us become so used to the convenience of the technology that if we don't have it, some of us would go stir crazy, especially those of us that operate solely on social media. And I'm not talking about because you just addicted to social media. I'm talking about those of us that we got social media that we operate in. Podcasts. We have a social media presence. We're on YouTube. We're doing whatever it is that we're doing because this is the thing that we're setting up to become part of the branding or whatever it is that we're developing that God has called us to develop. There are some people that are solely created businesses right here. Millennials are known that majority of what they do is done through their cell phones, through their technology, through their computers. Not having it is like, what is this? It's like an itch you cannot scratch. But nobody recognizes how the technology is now integrated into you. You don't have any control over it. Even if you wanted to not have it, it's integrated into what you wouldn't want it in. AI is integrated into everything. Even if you don't want to use it, it's still in your face. New applications, every application you download nowadays got AI somewhere in it. I can't go to a photo app without the photo app telling me, oh, you want to generate something new? I can't open certain things without it saying, oh, you want to try the new AI? I can't update something on my computer system without it telling me, You want the new AI update? And you can't avoid it. It's there. Why? Because just like this computer is in control. And the system was created in that way that it's in control and it integrates into everything that you do. So just as easily as they put it there, it can be disappeared. They can take it away from you because they get you to acquiesce into it. And then all of a sudden, if it's taken out of your hands, then you don't know how to function without it. And now they have more control over you, just like this computer. They came to the understanding that the computer was what was in control. And what Landing was trying to do was lead the breadcrumbs to lead back to the computer. And he knew this. His boss at the company was being held hostage by the computer. If you've ever seen the movie Eagle Eye, and I suggest you watch it, it talks about how every form of technology is integrated into each other, that they can find, track, and do whatever. It's there. Google Maps. Anybody ever been on Google Maps, and the fact that it can locate every scene sequence, can find your location and where you're going? You can track your entire trip through the Google Maps screen if you're walking, if you're driving, if you're whatever it is, which means that the satellites create a digital picture of an entire street, block, city, suburb, all of this, of wherever it is that you're trying to go, so they can find you. Your phone, if you have a location application activated, this is why there are YouTube videos that tell you you can turn all of this stuff off so nobody can locate where you're at. And for those of us that are children of God, sometimes God will have us do the same thing. He'll have us to turn our application location off because we got enemies. Seeking, looking, trying to find. Everything is integrated into a computer system. There used to be such a thing as a telephone booth. Don't nobody use no daggone telephone booth no more. Even when I was in New York, it wasn't such a thing as a telephone booth. It was these long electronic screen port things all over the place. And even they were going out of style when I was in New York. You could use them to make phone calls. You could use them to charge your cell phones. But even now, look at the fact that they've created these electric cars. And then one of their biggest complaints about these new electric car things is there's no port to charge your car where you go. Not every place has a place that you can charge your car at. Do you see how technology is taking over our lifestyles? We think we have freedom, but we're integrated by the system. Our parents had more freedom than we do because they were not attached to technology. I remember hearing a story one time about the fact that if everything that was created by a person of color was taken away, what would we have that would be operational? Darn near nothing. Street lights, the filaments inside of our light bulbs, certain things in our cars, in our systems. There was a point in time when we didn't need technology. And technology has become such a part of us that we don't understand that just as easily as they've created and they've integrated it in such a way by creating these vision glasses and VR sets, and Facebook has become a monopoly of Facebook, Google, YouTube have become monopolies over the entire system. Your Facebook is integrated. Your YouTube and your Google are integrated within one another, and they even fighting in Congress to say that Google has too much control over everything. Amazon, all of these kinds of things, because you're never supposed to have they call it an oligarchy of the market, democracy, where it's got too much control. That leaves no room for anybody else to have a position in that space. But what happens when it collapses? AT&T showed you what happens with your phone. If by one day the circuit no longer works, you can't even make a phone call. I don't even know if you can make emergency calls on your phone without the signal. Do you understand how integrated we are and how lack of control we have? If they tell you stay in your house and only to operate by your systems, your phones, because of what? You got sirens, you got notifications on your television, you got all of these kinds of things. Half of this stuff ain't even real because of the fact that they created it through propaganda and the technology they put in front of your face. Think of shows like Truman Show or movies like Truman Show. They created the entire environment within his life, and he had to come to the realization that he was trapped within a machine. A lot of us are trapped within a system, and it takes the individual that will stand up. Skinner stood up. Sully stood up. Why? Because Landon created him to stand on his own outside of the system. Why? Because he was the Moses of the story. Why? The Lord wanted me to bring this back to you to say this. The reason that the Battle of A.I was lost was because why? Does anybody remember? The things that were meant to be devoted to God were given to. You have to make a conscious decision. Are you going to allow technology to control you? In the movie Truman Show, the technology was the man's entire environment, and he had to make the decision at the end of the movie to separate himself even from the authority that was trying to control him, to tell him that it was safer for him to stay within the technology than it was to separate himself from the technology. Sully was the technology, and he was created by Landing in order to be the Moses of the situation that would lead back, would set people free from their idolatry of the system. Because all the old robots were set free. The slaves were set free. There was a war between old and new. There's a war going on constantly between technology and living your life in existence. There are people, as odd as it may seem, that actually operate without any technology in their life. You heard of the Amish? They live out on rural homestead living environments where they do everything themselves, disconnected from technology. I know it seems unusual, but sometimes you have to separate yourself. This is why you're going to see a lot of people, and one of the ministers I follow said this 2 years ago, that you're going to start to see individuals coming out of the systems and going independent as artists, independent as actors in movies and all of these kinds of things. They're going to separate themselves from the technology that's being created. Why? Because of the fact of the danger that it is, not to mention it leaves them no security, that what once was secure, they come to the realization just how much of a product they are, and they are separating themselves from the system. Because the system cannot continue to operate, and the system itself will collapse. So the only thing that they can do is separate themselves before the collapse in order for there to be an ability for them to salvage and rebuild independently. Independent actors, independent systems, independent companies, independent. You're going to see a lot of things going independent because it's going to separate from the technology of the system. Whether it's an actual technological system or whether it's the system that has been in place up until this point. Because what ended up happening is they had to go get the nanos. The nanos was the thing that was used in order to destroy the technological system's brain. It was in itself a virus that would literally destroy the inner workings of the system. And they had to insert it into the core of the computer. A lot of these things have been situated and set up in order to create a organized platform in order to prepare, and let's just be honest, the reason it was situated was in order to prepare the way for the Antichrist. Okay? That was why it was created, let's just be honest. That would come in acting as a savior, and they even state, and it's been declared before, that there was going to be a false creation of what it would look like for Jesus to return in order to control the people and then therefore lead them into coming into agreement with the organizational understanding of the order that they have developed. But the problem is they did it too soon. You cannot change God's times nor seasons because God is the one that is in control and he is the one that sits at the top. I was sitting there listening to what they were talking about in relation to the eclipse. And in it, they were talking about, oh, we saw its crown. We saw its corona. And I just sat there and I said, excuse me? You do know that corona means crown, right? It's a king. It's calling itself the king. God is the only king in this system. Okay? God. They think that they can control the system by declaring what they want. They tried to do it with the Pandora's box. And they called that the same thing, which was a crowning. The only thing that is in control is God. The king of pride is the only thing that tries to take its place. Why? But I will repeat the scripture that Lord gave me. Isaiah 14:13 through 16. That discusses the fact that it wanted to exalt itself as unto the Most High upon the mountains of the north side, our 7 mountains in our system. But God himself came forth and pulled them down to hell, shaking all of the kingdoms. New York was hit with an earthquake the day after, might add. The Statue of Liberty torch was hit by lightning. God ain't playing with these folks. Repent of your idols, because God is no longer playing. God is no longer playing. For such a time as this, God knows what he is doing. So Skinner was the only one that could insert the nanos into the middle of the machine. Why? Because he was the only one with an arm that was made out of the exact material of the robots. And Vicky wasn't expecting that. So when he took the nanos and shoved it into the center of her brain, therefore destroying the system, those of us that are called for such a time as this, there are things that we are supposed to do in this time frame that are going to destroy whole systems, cave in entire industries, cancel out entire things that have been there for years. Some of us are just simply called to replace the things that have been there that shouldn't have never been there in the first place, because they had human authority to sit in those seats, but spiritually the seat was vacant. But for such a time as this, I've been seeing 414 everywhere. God is about to rise up his people to replace those that were in idolatry, because AI is what? Giving what belongs to God to an idol. These systems, these computers, these things that want to crown themselves in the pride of God.